All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. As you can see by the laptops up here and some of the echoes, we have some members who are participating remotely today. So we're going to use the magic of Cisco WebEx to allow their participation, but we do have a quorum here in the room. We do have our 5 members, and we have Mr. Hershey, who is online for 6, and we have some other members who will be joining shortly. Ms. Edmonds is participating in another governmental meeting that is tied to her role on the school board, and so she will be joining us as soon as she can. And again, we have some other members who may be joining us remotely as well, who are out of town traveling for work. So the first item on our agenda today are the much anticipated staffing updates. Dr. Mutillo, when you are ready, let's hear from you.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chair Haggerty, members of the board, Superintendent Taylor. I am here today to provide an update on staffing and our recruitment efforts as we move through the beginning of the 24-25 school year. Specifically today, we will look at vacancy and hire data as of this month. We'll also take a look at our refreshed careers website, which will launch in the next few weeks, and the impact of our ongoing recruitment advertising effort and other recruitment programs in place in our district. So just as a reminder, the work we will talk about today does fall under the operational effectiveness priority area in our strategic plan and is aligned with AIM 15 under the essential pillar focused on high quality staff. And today in particular, we'll focus on the recruit and hire aspects of AIM 15. So let's start by looking at the numbers. I'm pleased to share that we are more than 98.5% staff for teachers as we move into this first quarter of the school year. For the second year in a row, we are seeing a decrease in the number of unfilled teacher vacancies overall at the beginning of the year. So we currently have 170 teacher vacancies among our more than 11,700 teacher positions. And this is an average of fewer than 1 per school and 82 vacant positions less than this time last year. We also saw a decrease in the number of unfilled IA positions. We have 53 fewer unfilled positions in this category than we did in September of 2023. We also have 16 more filled bus driver positions than we did this time last year. And so overall, among these 3 categories, we have 150 or so fewer vacancies than we had this time last year. So overall, good news on the staffing front. We continue to trend in a positive direction. This chart shows what our vacancy totals look like throughout the past year. For most of these job categories, you see peaks in June or July. This is when a lot of folks may resign, and then we have unfilled positions. It's also a really busy hiring season. So you see these peaks in June and July before they drop back down. You'll see the line for teacher vacancies, that's your bright blue line, that dropped significantly lower from more than 250 to 170 in the past year. So again, good signs there. This chart gives you an idea of the volume and type of hiring that our team does or has done since July 1 of this year. And there's some new categories. If board members remember similar presentations in the past. So new hires is something that we have always tracked. But this year we've teased out rehires from return hires. So rehires are your folks who generally, they were with us last year, maybe they were on a terminating contract or position ended, and we rehire them the next year. So there's really no break in service. They're not really leaving and coming back. But return hires are employees who do leave us for a period of time and then return to us. So we just thought this was a good number to tease out and track over time to see, are we getting some employees back who end up leaving us? And promotions are pretty self-explanatory. They're an employee who moves to another position at a higher salary. What you'll see here is 69 of the 134 promotions, or over 51%, were promotions to teachers. And of those 69, 59 of them came from instructional assistants to teachers. And this was encouraging for us to look at because last year we were much more intentional in trying to develop a pipeline from instructional assistants to teachers. These are folks who are in our classrooms. They kind of know what teaching's like because they're there. And so we partnered with Teach NC, surveyed all of our instructional assistants in the district to see who might be interested in being a teacher, and then invited them to an event called Teacher Bound, where we got some universities and other educator prep programs to present to these interested in IAs, as well as to do some focus groups with them. So to see that we saw a number of IAs move from IA to teacher is encouraging. We'll continue that effort this year and are building upon it. We're also going to invite some of our current teachers who have alternate licenses and haven't yet declared with an educator prep program. So we'll add that group, and hopefully that'll help with some retention of those employees as well. So some additional recruitment efforts. You'll see, we'll talk about changes to our careers website here, some of our recruitment advertising strategies, the results of some of our lead follow-ups, and other recruitment programs that have helped bring high qualified candidates into the district. So in the next couple of weeks, we will launch a refreshed version of our careers website alongside our communications team. We've been working for more than a year on developing and testing this website. It includes looking at competitors' websites, focus groups of current employees as well as new hires, and an audit and update of current content and site reorganization. We had a lot of stuff out there that maybe wasn't necessary for new hires and applicants, but more for employees. So we were able to kind of tease out what do our applicants really need to see on our career site. We've also already launched some landing pages aimed at recruiting specific job categories, and these refreshed sites will pair with those landing pages and give folks a better understanding of our district as well as the great programs that we offer. We also continue to use interest forms throughout the site to collect information from potential candidates that our recruiters can follow up on. And this is very different than what we used to do. We don't have to wait for an applicant to fill out a lengthy application. They can give us our name, email address, phone number, maybe a resume, and we have recruiters who can reach out and contact them and really source those leads that we're getting. And I think that has led to some of the positive results that we see. Other exciting parts of this website will be now candidates can also search for, let's say, a teaching job in Wendell. They could put that into the site, and they will get teaching jobs, similar searches, and see all of those right off of our career website. These jobs will also be searchable outside, which is, again, this is a big improvement on what used to have to happen. If you wanted a job in Wake County, you would have to know to go to our applicant tracking system, search in that applicant tracking system. But now if you open up a browser and just search, you'll be able to find our job. So this is an exciting piece. There's also an interactive map where you can see where the jobs in the county are. So if you're searching in one particular school, you could see schools that are close by and the openings that they have. Also, we'll have a place where you can sign up for job alerts, and that's the way a lot of folks do try to find jobs these days. So we're in the last part of our testing of this and hope to launch within a couple weeks. If you remember from one of your board updates, you have the test site. So if you haven't had a chance, feel free to access that link and kind of poke around to see what that new site will bring. We will also continue multiple advertising tactics. These include some of the things that we have started, such as search and display, where we purchase search terms so that when folks search, they actually land on our jobs. Radio advertising, both local and streaming, social media, as well as sponsored job postings on different job boards that are out there. We've also started to try some different tactics in the 2024 year. So we have email and text campaigns, mostly for bus drivers and mechanics, where they get alerts right to their email and phones. We have trade publication advertising, mostly, again, for mechanics and HVAC techs. We've also added some landing pages for special ed IAs and school leaders. Also TV advertising for bus drivers, and an additional LinkedIn campaign. So the firm that we partner with does give us metrics on things like number of clicks and number of interest forms that are submitted. But we also track the most important thing of all these leads, how many of them result in hires. So the data on this shows since February of 2024, how we've been able to convert those leads into hires. And you can see we have pretty strong results here from general ed teachers as well as some of our instructional assistants. Special ed teachers do remain an area of need, which is why we're continuing with the lead forms, and we also have a dedicated recruiter just for special ed positions. So we have made some progress, but we know that continues to be an area of need for us. Some other sources of highly qualified teaching candidates in particular include Participate Teachers. We continue to partner with them to not just fill vacancies, but fill vacancies with licensed, experienced teachers from other countries. We have 59 new Participate Teachers this year in our classrooms that represent 15 different countries. And that brings us to a total of 194 international teachers working in 58 schools across our district. These educators are certified to teach elementary, world language, ESL, and dual language courses. Another recruitment source for us continues to be our future teachers, and these are teachers who, they are our high school students, went to high school in Wake County, and they sign up to be future teachers, and as long as they finish their program, we are able to provide them with not only a job, but they get professional development throughout each year of college so that when they come in, they truly are better prepared than your average teaching candidate who may not know as much about Wake County and some of our instructional practices and areas of focus. So we had 44 high school students join our cohort in May 2024. That is our highest cohort since we started the program, so that is, again, another promising sign. And we currently have 117 college students participating in this program who will graduate, at different years as they matriculate through college. 75 future teachers have accepted positions with Wake since we started in 2019. One of our newer programs is Project Leaders. This is a federal grant that we were awarded to help us strengthen instructional and administrative staffing in some of our harder to fill positions in some of our higher need schools. So the grant allows us to offer recruitment and retention bonuses, fund professional learning, offer tuition assistance, things like national board reimbursement for teachers at those schools. Thanks to this program, we've hired over 133 certified staff in these 24 schools since January, and we've decreased the vacancy rate by 40% among these 24 schools. So just the first year of the program, but we are starting to see some promising signs. Just proud of the team for their persistence and out-of-box thinking, and mostly because this is the second time we applied. We missed by a point the first time, so it was good to resubmit and actually be awarded that grant. And lastly, just some additional recruitment efforts. We still have our early contracts that allow us to tap into our talented student teacher pool to fill vacancies. We also traveled to 26 college and universities last year, and those were successful in finding candidates for us as well. We had a virtual job fair in November, a spring teacher job fair in early March, and then a virtual support staff job fair in late June. We've also added new recruiters to our team that I've referenced, and they have played a critical role in candidates want to hear from us as soon as they click an interest form. And for the first time, we are able to do that, and it's very exciting to be able to really interact with folks early on in the process. We will also continue this year advertising for teachers, IAs, bus drivers, school leaders. We've recently started collaborating closely with Nate Slavic and his team to develop additional strategies for recruiting HVAC techs and potentially other M&O positions, much like we've been doing with bus drivers. And we will have another fall job fair and are hopeful to have another spring job fair as well. So that's an overview of staffing and recruitment. I know it was quick, but you all have a busy agenda, and I wanted to leave some time for questions if you had them.
All right, thank you, Dr. Mutillo. I appreciate it. A lot of good information in the presentation. I'll open it up to the board members if anyone has any questions or any comments. Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you. Dr. Mutillo, when we have our future teachers, and I know that that is a really strong recruitment piece for our seniors that are looking to graduate and go into education, do we provide them information with the current iteration of the Teaching Fellows program in case that's something that they want to pursue? Are they able to look at both, being a future teacher and a teaching fellow?
They can absolutely do both. I don't know how intentional we are about providing that information to them, but that's a great idea and something I can look at in our initial outreach to them. But yeah, you can absolutely do both.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Further questions or comments? Ms. Caulfield?
Thank you. And it sounds like we have a lot of good things coming this way, so thank you for that help. On slide number 6, can you just clarify the difference between the rehire and return hire?
Yes. So a rehire never really leaves us. They were with us last year. Maybe they were on a one-year contract or they were in a position that end dated, and we just rehire them back for the next year. Not all teachers are on those like one-year renewable contracts that automatically renew. A return hire has actually left us, and now they've come back to Wake County. And this is something we've not tracked in the past, but as we look to really refine our data, we thought that was an important thing for us to be able to start tracking.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Swanson.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for these updates. It's exciting to see that we are making progress, but we know that there's still much more progress to make, and it would also make our lives a little bit easier if we had a friendlier General Assembly that would increase the compensation for our teachers. So I'll say that and dive into my question. As it relates to the 26 universities and the college fairs, how many of those are on HBCU campuses?
We do attend many of our HBCU campuses as well. I don't have that number with me, but I can get you a list of all the ones that we attend.
That would be helpful, especially as we are trying to look to diversify our teaching pipeline. It would be really great to encourage some of those HBCU grads to potentially come our way.
Absolutely.
And then my second question is kind of along the lines of Ms. Mahaffey with the Future Teacher program. Is there a way that we can start advertising that much earlier to students versus waiting until they're in high school, maybe getting that to middle school counselors and freshman counselors as well? So therefore, they're hearing it from multiple aspects, not just at that end of their senior year, as an opportunity to recruit them into Wake County Public Schools.
Yeah, we can definitely look at additional layers of advertising earlier on in the process. That's a good suggestion, Mr. Swanson.
That works. I mean, the master's pay, hopefully that will help, because we are probably one of the only few that have reinstated master's pay since the General Assembly has not. So thank you for your work on this.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanson. Dr. Ng.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and I really enjoyed going to the Futures Teachers graduation recently. And my question is really more for regarding the Refresh Careers website. And I mean, in your opinion, what is the kind of the rate limiting step or things that kind of slow down the process for whereby people want to explore the professions? What kind of things can we do better in terms of how to kind of expedite that process for them?
Yeah, I think the careers website is certainly a part of that, right? If you're interested in a position in Wake County and you have to know to go to Wake County, to go to our applicant tracking system, to apply for a job and put a lot of lengthy information in there, that can certainly be a barrier to us being able to get strong candidates. This career site allows us to do a couple things. Most people just, open up a browser and they just start searching, right? So our jobs will now become discoverable through that. The career site also gives us those landing pages so we can interact with candidates right on the front end of it. Whereas in the past, sometimes, especially from the HR perspective, we're not interacting with that candidate until we actually get a hiring recommendation from the school. So we're able to, even before the schools see the folks, we can interact with them, we can answer their questions, and just being able to get back in touch with them quickly has been a benefit because they get to answer questions, and then we get to turn around to schools and say, here's a pool of candidates that we've talked to, we know they're interested. So that's going to be a big benefit. Signing up for job alerts, I think, is going to be huge for the website. It certainly goes beyond our career site, though. When you talk about folks wanting to go into education, there's some things that are tough about being a teacher. There's not a lot of flexibility. The pay is not, as comparable to some other professions. So those do serve as barriers. But us being able to advertise the benefits of teaching, us being, Mr. Swanson mentioned the master's pay that the board approved. That has been a huge enticement for us and help in reaching out to the teacher candidates that are out there. So I think we're just trying multiple ways to be able to do that. Future Teachers is another one where we're trying to get them in high school. I think ideally if we could get them even before a senior, develop more kind of pre-teacher programs in our high schools. I mean, that could be a good step in the right direction. So just thinking through beyond just what our recruitment and career site might be. Yeah. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ring. So you shared some wonderful numbers about a lot of our school-based positions, and to see all of these fill rates up over 96% is great, especially from where we were in the last few years. But, there is one number that sticks out, and that is the number for our bus drivers. And I'm sure everyone at this table has gotten emails from parents who are still experiencing transportation problems. We hear about being able to fill all of our routes, but we've reduced the number of routes, made the routes longer, and oftentimes because of the lack of drivers, we'll have some students that missed deadlines or through no fault of their own no longer have access to transportation. So, we've raised the pay from the $15 an hour we get from the state to $20 an hour with the help of our county commissioners and local funding. You've shared all of the new recruiting tools, recruiting ideas, what you've done with the website, with the job fairs. But systematically, is there anything that you think we need to change if we know that there are just fewer drivers out there? We're doing everything we've been doing traditionally, but doing it better, and we're getting better results, but we're still far behind where we need to be to fill these positions. Is there anything else that you can think of to recommend that we might need to do as a board or a district to really broaden that reach? For example, have you heard, are there still issues with pay, or are there issues with hours? Are there people that inquire about positions looking just to drive specific shifts or flexibility? Or is there any feedback you can give us to help us get that fill rate up from the 60s back up to the 90s?
Yeah. Great question. I think on the hiring side, we have made great strides. There's a team of HR folks, transportation folks who meet every other week to look at our pipeline from application through background check, through DMV testing, through hire. We've actually been able to hire 166 total bus drivers since June of 2023. 166. So I think a lot of our recruitment strategies, the focus on hiring, is really starting to pay off. We are seeing monthly numbers now ticking up a little bit as compared to these months last year. Have to think that the $20 does help, and in fact, some of our folks who are really hands-on with that work are seeing some bus drivers now returning because of that. I think the next thing we need to look at is the retention aspect and how do we keep the drivers that we have. So if we're bringing in 166, keeping the ones that we have. We are starting to look at, and we've done some focus groups and some surveys of bus drivers who have left us. And we're getting some of that data back now, and this team will help analyze that to see what else can we be doing. So I think once we have some of that data to look at, that could be a good source to see what else we could do to retain our bus drivers.
I appreciate it.
Oh, sorry.
And Mr. Chair, I want to just add some comments in terms of where we are as a state. And so when we look at the number of bus driver vacancies, last year was around 1,100. I got some information from the Superintendent's Association last week, and now those vacancy numbers are around 1,300, and so across the state. And so what that says is that this is impacting everybody across the state, and in light of that, we're at least in a position where we are increasing our numbers when we or decreasing the vacancies, I should say, while the trend continues to rise across the state. I agree with Dr. Matillo that we want to continue the work of identifying and rewarding those bus drivers that have longevity, because we do have a number. I had a chance to speak with the district drivers at Apex High School today and recognize Mr. Monk, who's been with us 45 years as a bus driver. And so I welcome the opportunity to recognize that here. But the more I think about this problem, the more I think at some point we may have to address this as a state, because this is having a serious impact on kids being able to get to school. And like board members, I get messages every other day about kids being late and the bus situation and vacancies. And so even though we've reduced the number of routes, we wanted to make sure that we had drivers that covered every route, but also subs or additional drivers when we know there will be vacancies. So we're still processing, trying to figure out the best thing that we can do, and we're getting slightly better when the situation is getting worse across the state. So.
So the one piece I wanted to add is the ads that advertise the pay increase that you all have approved recently hit the market. It takes, about 30 days, 60 days to see those folks kind of go through those steps. And so we don't yet know what the impact of that is. And that's one of the pieces that we'll, in the next coming months, start to see once the word gets out about the pay increase.
And so, Chief Luton, just as a follow-up, I know that we had passed a budget with those increases a while ago before the school hiring started, but we couldn't legally advertise those, right, because we didn't have a state budget. Is that correct?
What was the delay?
I think we more wanted to wait until we had a full board-approved budget, as well as, it started July 1, so we had this conversation about having clean messaging, and we really wanted it to already be in effect when we started that advertising.
Great.
I forgot to mention that on that team is also communications, who helps us think through those kinds of issues as we're advertising and trying to reach our applicants.
Okay, thank you. Now, we do have a question from Mr. Hershey, who is joining us remotely. So we'll turn it over to the control room to patch Mr. Hershey through.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Three questions. You mentioned going to, I think, 26 universities and colleges. Who goes on those trips?
Generally, it's a combination of members of our recruitment team along with principals as well.
Okay. Have you gotten feedback from principals on kind of the work that's been going on and the changes to websites and the hiring website and their ability to search for candidates for their schools?
So the website hasn't gone live yet, so we haven't had a lot of feedback on that yet. I have had some anecdotal feedback of just them being just thankful that we now have recruiters who can provide them with some candidates to look at, and that has been a positive. Because they're doing the hard work on the ground. They're doing all of the interview processes and making the selection. So I think they are thankful that we can now hand them lists of candidates who we know are interested and qualified and want to come to the Wake County Public School System.
Yeah, I was talking to a principal just the other day, and that was the precise ask, was help them get a list of candidates that they can interview. The last question I have, and how do we determine, because we're talking about instructional assistants, and we have X amount of openings still. How do we determine the number of IAs we want to have in the school system?
I think it's more of based on funding formulas than what we would like or desire. So there are state allotments, and then, I think I'm going to talk out of my department, so I'm just going to be quiet for now. But it is based on allotment formulas, Mr. Hershey, and I don't want to misspeak on exactly how those formulas work.
It looks like you have a relief hitter coming in. Mr. Nieder, can you, hold on one second.
Yeah.
Sam, David Nieder's walking up. He may be able to provide some additional information for you.
Yes, Dr. Matillo is correct. It's based upon allotment formulas.
Is
We
the
have,
mic on?
we have standard formulas for allotting resources, teachers, counselors, social workers, and instructional assistants, and they're based on student membership in our schools. And so that's the number of instructional assistant positions we have as a district is based upon our ADM and those formulas.
I think it would be helpful, and this is just my opinion, of course, if we put out numbers of what we would want to have in an ideal world where the state fully funded these positions, so people could understand that the levels we would prefer to be at with instructional assistants, not just having to do it based on the funding that they are currently giving. And I would do that for kind of, I know we sometimes highlight that for some other positions, but I think instructional assistants are incredibly valuable in what they do in our classrooms. And so I don't know what that number is, but I'd be curious for our staff to kind of put out where they would love to be in an ideal world when it came to IAs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. All right, then. Are there any further questions for either Mr. Nieder or Dr. Mutillo? All right. We really appreciate the update. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
The next item on our agenda is we have a presentation on the Cooperative Innovative High School application. This is the application for the updates that have to be made for our leadership academies. All right. We'll welcome Mr. Domenico. All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Domenico. Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. All right, so first of all, thank you all for this opportunity to talk to you about the Wake Young Men and Wake Young Women's Leadership Academy. My good friend and colleague to my right here, will do a lot of the heavy lifting. Say it again. Gotcha. Got it. Thank you. I do believe you can hear me now. All right, great. So Paul will do a lot of the heavy lifting, as this is a part of the application process. The application is due next month, so we've been kind of back and forth with the principals, making sure we viewed a lot of the information that parents and families provided to us a few months ago as we've tried to build this application that will be going to DPI. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mrs. Domenico.
Good afternoon, Board Chair Hegarty, Dr. Taylor, members of the board. Appreciate your time this afternoon. As Mr. Williams said, we are here to talk about updates with this Cooperative Innovative High School application. My supervisor and our colleague, Dr. Kimberly Lane, was also going to be with us today, but she is out sick these past 2 days, so she sends her regards. So with that said, we're going to jump into the first part of this and start with the context and history of what got us up to this point and catch you a little bit up to speed. Of course, in July, Governor Cooper signed HB 900 into effect, and that allowed a couple of items for our leadership academies. One, it continued their cooperative innovative high school status for this current school year, even though we ended the partnership with St. Augustine's University. And so our leadership academies have been working with Wake Tech Community College. Dr. Rawls and his staff have done a great job of collaborating with us to make sure that it was as seamless as a transition as possible for our students, as they are now at the North Campus where they're taking their college courses this year. And some of our leadership academy teachers are up there as well too. So again, thank you to Wake Tech for making that happen. This also allowed us to keep the calendar flexibility for our leadership academies, and they're able to follow the Wake Tech Community College calendar this year as they're moving forward. This bill also allowed for us to just simply shift, I would say, with an approved application to a new university partner. And back in July, our board approved the partnership with Shaw University so that they could be that new college partner. So since that point, we have been working with Shaw University on this new application. And when I say we, I do mean representatives from Shaw. There have been departments within our school system. And of course, as Mr. Williams mentioned, our two principals, Mr. King and Ms. Walker, have been critical in some of those planning parts. It's also important to point out some other parts about the HB 900, which I have over there in the blue boxes on the side. And one that it does allow us to switch the college-university partner and substitute in a new one. But this application that we do have to submit, it doesn't have to go through the competitive process. And in other words, it does need to go to our joint advisory committees at the state level and then go to the State Board of Education for approval. But in a typical process, it would need that level of approval and then go to the General Assembly for that competitive process. And that means being one of 3 applications that would have to move forward to the General Assembly and then get approved by the General Assembly before we could move forward. So what this bill allows for us is to not go through that competitive process. Once we have an application that is acceptable and meets the requirements of Cooperative Innovative High School and the State Board approves it, that means we can move forward for the 2025-26 school year. The second part that is important is that this application that we submit does have to meet the general statutes and requirements of a cooperative innovative high school. And that's also a driver in what we have to have in this application to make sure that it passes what the Joint Advisory Committee is looking for and the State Board of Ed. So in that next part, we talk a little bit more about those, what are those requirements? What do we have to make sure is in this application, and what does the state need in order to pass this application through and approve it? And in addition, we'll have some highlights of what's in the application that we have in partnering with Shaw. So as you can see, as moving down through there, for a cooperative innovative high school, it has to support a 9 through 13 model. What we submit has to be for a high school. It cannot include any middle grades. So this application is for a 9 through 13 cooperative innovative high school. For one application, a school can have no more than 100 students per grade level, 400 total in 9 through 12, and that's important information that we'll come back to later on. Also, students in 9 through 13 are expected to be prepared and to have that college experience, and it has to be different than College and Career Promise, right? College and Career Promise is something that our 11th and 12th graders all have access to with approval, and they can take college courses as well and get credits for them. In a cooperative innovative high school or early colleges, students as early as 9th and 10th grade are encouraged and need to be taking college courses, and they also need to have what they call the college experience. Students prepare and start taking a more heavy university load. They're ready for what that university life will look like, and they'll be successful there. So that's also part of what we have to have in the application. Also, you see that we noted that Shaw's campus can integrate enough students for us to submit one application. Also, I wanted to note that historically, when we looked at the numbers for both the young men's and the young women's leadership academies together over the course of their years that they've been open and been at early college, together they have not gone over 400 total students 9 through 12. And also each of their individual grade levels, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, have also been under 100 students total each year. And that's an important part to share because, again, the CIHS legislation says we can go up to 100 per and 400 total. So they're going to want to see that what we're submitting, if we have an application, can meet that threshold. It's also important to note that it does allow us to substitute for both academies, But if we substitute it for both academies, we don't have the total number of students that could go up to the 800 that would allow. And also Shaw's campus wasn't at a point now where we could also build that into the model right now. So that's a driver and where we have to go with our application and what we're submitting, and we'll talk more about that here in just a bit. So next we talk about, so what are the implications of this application that we're submitting? Because as you're probably thinking, this might create some shifts in what the model looks like. And we're recognizing those shifts, but we also are trying to keep in mind as we move forward in planning that we keep some consistency in for our families and what they have now and for our staff at both academies, because we recognize that there's been a number of academic successes at these two schools for the students and what they've experienced, and that they have graduated from our two leadership academies, college and career ready, moving forward. So as we've tried to work through this, we're recognizing what this makes us have to do, but also trying to keep things consistent for our families moving forward too. So with that in mind, you'll see as that implications, we're talking about what I mentioned, we are submitting one application, and the total number of students in 6 through 8 at the two academies and in the 9 through 13 Cooperative Innovative High School will be similar to the current numbers that we have now. Those number of students that we serve will remain consistent with what we're seeing now with this new application. The submission does have to be for a 9 through 13 early college model per legislation, like I mentioned previously. But that means that there will be one 9 through 13 early college high school, and we'll have two 6 through 8 single gender academies. And what we're doing now is working with staff to keep the funding and staffing at these three schools consistent with what the two 6 through 13 academies currently have. Right? Again, going back to that part of keeping the models consistent for our families, because we know that's been successful. We know that our families like it. On the Cooperative Innovative High School application, it does allow us to request a location waiver. And so we are submitting that location waiver, and that goes back into kind of keeping those structures the same. Specifically, we're asking on there that the dedicated space for 9th and 10th graders for their high school courses will be where they currently are. So that waiver is to keep our 9th and 10th graders where they are. The young women at the Governor Moorhead campus and the young men at the Thompson building where they're taking their courses. So again, that talks about what our families are experiencing and keeping that similar for them. But also we have to meet that other part of Cooperative Innovative. I mentioned the 9th and 10th graders taking university courses. So Shaw has been great in working with establishing what are some virtual courses that our students can take on the university level that they could take at the leadership academies, at the Moorhead campus in the Thompson building. And also, they've been setting up with us what are ways these 9th and 10th graders can have field experiences at Shaw University so they could meet and work with the 11th through 13th grade students that are there, kind of like a mentor buddy. But then also they can go around and see on these field experiences, these field trips, if you would, what the college experience is like, so that when they go to Shaw, they'll be prepared as 11th graders to move forward and be successful in their university courses. So that takes us to where we are with next steps with the application process. As I mentioned before, there is a due date that we have to get this to the Department of Public Instruction, and we're submitting it by October 4th. So we'll be getting the appropriate signatures. It requires our board chair and our superintendent, along with the chair of the Board of Trustees from Shaw University. Also, we need to communicate any updates to staff and families along the lines of what we're talking about now and getting some feedback from them or getting some questions from them too, because we're sure there'll be questions along the way in terms of what this brings. Since we have to establish a new Cooperative Innovative High School, a high school model for this, that means there'll be a name for the high school. So that means at a future board meeting, we'll be recommending a new CIHS name to the board. And then also finalizing and continuing with the development of the memorandum of agreement with Shaw University. We've already had an initial conversation about that, and we'll continue those conversations so that we have a fully developed MOA with Shaw University that we'll also bring to the board at a future meeting. Of course, once we submit the application, work's not done. There's a lot of prep and planning that needs to go in place to make everything successful from the moment we turn in that application to when students actually start with this new model starting in 2025-26. And as you can see, some of the different things that are there, continuing conversations with Shaw about the leadership development opportunities and course offerings that our students can take and also what they can sign up for and enroll for next year. Developing the logistics that will be needed as we have students on Shaw's campus. That's both with bus and carpool and also any staff or high school classrooms for the high school courses that our 11th and 12th graders will need to take. Any amenities that our students need to have access to. And you also see making sure that we have the academic supports for our students to make sure they're successful. And in their early college model, that always means our high school folks and the university level folks are meeting collaboratively together to talk about the success for our students and making sure that they're on the right path. And that last part we talk about is developing the timeline that includes any student and parent meetings that need to happen over the course of time as we continue to get questions that we can answer for them and get feedback from families along the way. So with that being said,
All right.
any questions?
Everyone, you've seen the presentation, and Mr. Swanson, I'm going to rely upon you to, it's been, calm down.
I'm fairly certain
Okay.
Mr. Hershey has some questions.
I figure Mr. Hershey does have some inquiries. I know he's been working very hard on this, along with other board members. Mr. Hershey, if you're available, I will open it up to questions that
Sure.
you have first.
So I want to just start off on a couple of things. So I'm listening to the presentation, and I had a great meeting with families, and one thing that I want to acknowledge is that we have brilliant students in our leadership academies, and which means we have some pretty brilliant parents, and they had a lot of questions. It sounds to me like one of the big drivers is what a definition of a high school is, and that we had it as 6 through 13, but we are not allowed, even with HB 900, to define the high school as 6 through 13 going forward. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. With legislation, it does say it has to be a high school model, as defined as grades 9 through 13.
Okay. Is there a reason or a downside that we aren't just doing 2 9 through 13 applications so we keep them separate?
So if we submitted 2 separate applications, I think the biggest part that would be looked for once we go to joint advisory and a state board is those total numbers. If we submit 2 applications, we need to be able to serve up to 800 students. And also that means that Shaw's campus has to have the capacity to have an increase, double the amount of students that we currently have. So that's a big driver there, Mr. Hershey. And with that being said, currently with both schools together, we've never gone
Right.
over 400. So that
I
capacity
get
is in
that,
place.
but is there, in the application, we can't limit the number on, like, self-impose a limit below 100 to ensure that we can manage with Shaw? But, I mean, there's no mechanism that we can say, we want to have the men's and we'll cap it at 50, and we want to have the women's and we will cap it at 60, and then it keeps them separate.
Yeah, there's not a self-imposed mechanism like that we can just say, we're going to do it this way and have to. With the state, and then when they look at it, they're going to say, well, you have 110 total students, and that is one cooperative innovative high school, so we wouldn't approve 2 in terms of.
I understand. So I understand what you're telling me that DPI is going to say, apparently. The problem is, and this is me representing the families, we passed HB 900, and the expectation was, okay, maybe there'd be a couple of changes, but effectively we would have the same setup that we have now. That was really the impression that I think a lot of families had, why we went through the lengths of HB 900, what is in HB 900. And so now we're kind of saying, well, yes and no, we will keep students apart and on their campuses, 6 through 10, but it's still going to be only one high school. And there is a lot of love and a lot of desire for 2 separate ones. And I think the other aspect of this, and this needs to be addressed pretty quickly, not necessarily today, but prior to an application, there's a lot of stress now with our families with the needing to be an application from 8th to 9th grade, because it's not a continuous one, whether it's 1 or 2 separate ones. And so we really need to address that. To me, it should be an automatic, a right of first refusal, or however we have to do it. But that's a big item with families as well. So I know it's a lot. I would encourage us to have a meeting directly with families on this, so I don't have to be the go-between, and so they can come straight from central service staff. And I know you guys are doing a great job, and I know there's push from DPI on things, so it's not that I don't understand some of it, but understand that these parents are really well informed. They have a lot of great questions, and I'd really like to set up a way for them to just ask direct questions and get direct answers. Thank you.
Yep, and Mr. Hirsch, as we put on the slide presentation, we'll make sure that we build in opportunities to share out with families and to hear from families as well. So as we are creating our timeline, we'll make sure we build in for that as well. And I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned one thing as far as the setup and how this particular application may look. It is a situation where we did look at a lot of the feedback from families who wanted to try to keep the setup, and that means the 6th through 10th graders on the Leadership Academy campus. So we were able to create that particular process and setup. So yes, I get it where with this application, all of the students will funnel into one particular high school, but actually keeping all the students in the same type facility as we were when we were with the other university, that is the exact same setup. There'll be some logistics that we'll have to work out as far as personnel, but everything else is pretty much the same. And that's what we were trying to do while at the same time honoring what the application was asking as we went back and forth with our colleagues at DPI.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Hershey, any follow-up?
No, I appreciate everything Mr. Williams had to say just now.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mahaffey?
Thank you. In looking at slide 4, down near the end, I think it's bullet 2, where it talks about students will have access to virtual university courses from Shaw. I know the term virtual courses has a lot of mixed feelings, we'll say. And so I'm curious if it's possible for some of our Wake County teachers to get certified to teach college courses through Shaw, to make that go away. From my own experience, again, as my kids say, back in the 1900s, we had a teacher at our school that was certified through a local university, so we were able to get credit for those courses. Or I know we have a few teachers already in the system that will adjunct in the evenings at local university courses, seeing if that's a possibility as well with Shaw as we look into this new model. And that's just a suggestion. I don't know if that's something you're
Great
looking at already.
suggestion, and we have already had dialogue about that with the administrative team at Shaw. Either A, can the professors come to the academies to actually teach the 9th and 10th grade courses, whatever it may be, or B, some type of adjunct professor type situation. So that is something that we are talking with them about and seeing what we can get set up as far as that is concerned. So great question.
Yeah, because I just know if I told my high schooler that was happening, they'd be like, no, I'm good. So my next question is, and I wish Dr. Lane was here, but Paul, I'm hoping you can understand my muddle. When we have a new magnet theme, we ask our teachers in that school, whether it's remagnetized under a new theme or just getting a new magnet theme, to recommit to the school. Is that something we anticipate our teachers doing with this new model?
So, we've already started to have conversations with like those departments, HR and budgeting, on what this might look like. And we want to make this the smoothest transition for staff too, recognizing that a lot of the positions, or the positions that will be in the high school model, are similar to what the two academies have in place now. So it's more communicating with them on what this looks like and making all the pieces fit. So,
So maybe.
yeah. So, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, yeah. I
Too
don't-
early to tell.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, we don't anticipate like a wholesale, kind of like with the MSAP model, where there's a new grant coming in and everybody has to go through that recommitment process. It will not,
Right.
it will not be similar to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. See, you did understand what I
Yes.
was asking.
I did, yes.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. And I did want to say, we're now up to 8 members. We've been joined online by our Vice Chair, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, and in person by Ms. Edmonds. So welcome to you both. All right, are there any final questions for Mr. Domenico or for Mr. Williams? All right, thank you both. We appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the 2023-2024 WCPSS testing and accountability results. Board members have had a chance to review some preliminary information, and this is our formal presentation by Ms. Julie Malik and by Dr. Clinton Robinson. Welcome, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. Board Chair Haggerty, esteemed board members, and Superintendent Taylor. Today we are here to share student achievement results for the 23-24 school year. This will be a high-level overview, which is a reflection of the progress we made as a district and the areas we need to intensify our efforts. Joining me today is Ms. Julie Malik, who is the Senior Director for School Accountability. Unfortunately, Dr. McMillan could not join us this morning, or this afternoon, due to other obligations and responsibilities. As we review these results, I want you to remember that behind every data point is a student who, despite challenges, is striving towards success. Today's presentation is a snapshot of where we stand, but it also represents a call to action with regards to where we need to go. During the board work session in October, we will provide a strategic plan update in which you will be able to dive into the data metrics in totality, in which we will touch every aspect from a myriad of perspectives so that we can engage in that work. So when we look at the summary of the student achievement results for this afternoon, they are directly tied to our strategic plan. Strategic priority number 1, goal number 2, and goal number 3. And when we think about our graduation rate, goal number 1 states that we will annually graduate 98% of students prepared to reach their full potential and lead productive lives in a complex and changing world. Goal number 2 talks about our proficiency rate, which we want 90% of our 90% of our students will meet or exceed grade level proficiency. And then when we talk about growth, we want 90% of our schools will exceed statewide growth average, and we also include 100% of our students will exceed the statewide growth average as well. So as we review the outcomes for this year's high school graduation cohort, it is crucial to recognize the unique journey these students have taken. They began high school in 2020, one of the most challenging times in modern education history. Their experience has been shaped by remote learning, hybrid rotations, and for many of the students, they dealt with virtual academy in isolation. Despite these obstacles, these students have demonstrated resilience, and the data we see today is reflective of these unprecedented circumstances. So as you look at this slide, this year our district achieved a record high graduation rate of 91.3%, marking a 1.4 increase over the previous year. And while we celebrate this achievement, we recognize that the remaining 8.7% of our students still need attention and support. This milestone is a testament to our collective dedication to ensuring that every student graduates. What's particularly inspiring are the substantial gains among our English learners and Hispanic students who achieved increases of 8.9 and 5.6% respectively. These improvements reinforce that when we invest in equity and provide targeted support for our most vulnerable students, we achieve extraordinary results. With that said, our focus remains on ensuring that all students across all demographics are on path to graduation and success beyond high school. And I know that we're going to really dive into group data and things of that nature during our strategic planning update. But at this time, I would ask Julie just to provide Just a snapshot of the subgroup data with respect to graduation rates and proficiencies.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. We highlighted, of course, the English learners and the Hispanic students, but I would like to note that the large majority of our student groups did see a nice little increase in graduation rate, not to that extent. There were a few groups that did drop slightly. Our black students and our Asian students did see a slight decrease in the graduation rate. I would also like to mention that we are in mid-September, and this is actually they're still doing a little data cleanup at DPI, so it is potential we're going to see a little bit of an adjustment again in the October board meeting of around the 3rd. And at that time, as Dr. Robinson mentioned, hopefully we'll be able to share that when we discuss some of the strategic plan metrics. Can we discuss the proficiencies? You haven't hit there yet.
No, let's
Okay.
go to that a little
Okay.
bit. No worries.
No worries.
While our district's overall graduation rate is impressive, it is even more encouraging to see that 26 of our schools are outperforming the state average. We also have 20 schools above our district average of 91.3%. Furthermore, 16 schools have achieved over a 98% graduation rate, and 7 schools have a perfect 100% graduation rate. These schools set the benchmark for what is possible. And just for the awareness for the board, I've directed the Office of Data Research and Accountability to connect with Malik Wazell at Wakefield High School, Shawana Jacobs at Leesville Road High School, and Eddie Harden at Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School. These schools have demonstrated the most significant increases in graduation rates across our district. And it is crucial that we capture and highlight the impactful work they've done to achieve these results. By learning from their successes, we can explore ways to replicate their best practices across our schools, across the district. Our proficiency rates are a clear indicator of student learning, and this year, 64.2% of our students met the expected academic standards, which is an increase from last year. And so, but perhaps what's even more critical than our grade level proficiency is our focus on college and career readiness, where nearly half of our students, 47.7%, are prepared to take on the next phase of their lives. These numbers are a step in the right direction, but they also serve as a reminder, the reminder that we must push harder to ensure that every student, not just some, is truly ready for the future. This is about more than just meeting benchmarks. It's about real preparation for life beyond our classrooms. In comparison to the 115 PSUs across the state, we are ranked number 7th when it comes to grade level proficiencies, and we are 4th when it comes to college and career readiness. In several key areas, as Julie stated, our students have not only recovered but surpassed pre-pandemic levels in grade 4-6 math, grade 4-5 reading, and grade 5 science. We are seeing performance that exceeds what we saw before the pandemic. Our high school students are also showing significant growth in these subjects like Math 1, Math 3, and English 2. This isn't just a bounce back. It is truly, truly a leap forward. These improvements reflect the hard work of our teachers, the resilience of our students, and the effectiveness of our targeted academic interventions. But the work doesn't stop here. We will continue to build on this momentum. Now, the next couple of slides will focus on school growth and school performance grades. It is important to remember that growth and proficiency are not the same. While proficiency tells us whether students have met grade level standards, growth measures how much progress they've made over the years. The EVOS growth model helps us understand whether students are improving relative to their peers across the state. At this time, I will ask Julie to really dive into how schools and subgroups achieve their state designations.
So the EVOS model, as Dr. Robinson mentioned, it's truly a comparison of around similar students across the state and their averages. So it's a backward facing, it's not a did you meet this projection moment. So when we look at EVOS, it's often reported, it is reported in terms of index values, where North Carolina is sitting at 0. That's the average across North Carolina. So then when we look at these exceed, met, or did not meet growth indicators, you look at -2 to +2 index as meeting growth. +2 and above would be exceeding, and less than -2 is when a school or a subgroup did not meet growth.
We are proud to report that 85% of our schools either met or exceeded their growth expectations this year, marking the highest growth rate our district has seen in over a decade. This is a significant accomplishment and speaks to the district-wide effort to ensure that every student, regardless of their starting point, is making measurable progress. The increase in the number of schools exceeding growth expectations from 57 last year to 77 this year demonstrate that our strategies are working. But our mission is to keep raising the bar, ensuring that even more students in schools can exceed these expectations in the future. Now, our school performance grades are showing promising trends, but this year we have reduced the number of designated schools that were low performing, and the number of schools earning A's and B's are on the rise as well. This means that more schools are performing at a higher level. Our commitment to continue pushing for improvement across all schools so that every student has access to high-quality education, we are moving in the right direction. At this time, I would like Julie to really discuss and share with the board how we define low-performing schools, and then, more importantly, how performance grades are calculated.
Yes, so the low-performing schools is defined in state legislation as a designation from the state. That designation, if we look at the past two metrics of the growth, so let's go back to growth, the school has to either meet or not meet growth, and they are either a D or F school. So any combination of those four designations out of growth and school performance grade gives them the low-performing designation. Reversely, if they have a, B, or C or exceed growth, they are not on the list. When we think about these designations and we think about the importance of growth, growth is 20% of the school performance grade. It is also a separate indicator in the low-performing list. So growth counts in both of those metrics that ultimately result in a school being designated as a low-performing school. So it kind of counts in both columns there.
Can you share with them what proficiency count is, the 80%?
The 80% at elementary, middle school are reading, math, science proficiency, as well as EL progress, which is the movement toward English language attainment for our multilingual learners. Also, at the high school, there are more indicators such as math course rigor, which are the number of seniors who have achieved a Math 3 course credit. Graduation rate is part of that. Also, there's a metric that measures how students do on the ACT and the ACT work keys. So high schools have more metrics in that 80% than elementary, middle, and therefore we do notice that if we look at this span of A through F grades, you'll notice that high schools tend to do a little bit better on the measure than elementary and middle schools.
Thank you, Julie. So in summary, our district has made remarkable strides in the face of extraordinary challenges. Our graduation rate is at an all-time high, and we've seen proficiency levels improve across multiple subjects and grade levels. Perhaps most encouraging is the fact that 85% of our schools met or exceeded growth expectations, a reflection of the tireless work being done by our educators and the determination of our students. While we are proud of these accomplishments, we know there is still more work to be done. Our focus remains on ensuring that every student in every school has the opportunity to succeed. We are not satisfied with good, we are striving for greatness. So at this time, we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robinson. Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. Thank you for this information. I'm excited to take a deeper dive in October. I do want to offer some context to the public and to the media for slide 12 about the school performance grades. In all of the states in the country that use A through F school performance grades, North Carolina has the absolute worst formula in the country. Other states that use them balance the 80% test score and the 20% growth, or they don't use that formula. It's more balanced. It might be 60-40, it might be 50-50, it's not 80-20. North Carolina is the only one that uses that 80-20 where growth is not reflected. Some states have eliminated them. And the final point I'll make about it is that, I could grind my teeth to powder. It infuriates me. There have been multiple bipartisan efforts, Republicans and Democrats in the North Carolina General Assembly, that have proposed bills to improve the formula and make it more fair and more balanced. Superintendent Truitt has called for this being recalculated and done a different way, a better way. All of those efforts have failed. So we need to understand that context, and I'd really like for y'all to, I don't know what my suggestion is, but somehow in October, if you could share with us what this would look like, if that formula was more appropriate, maybe more comparable to what other states have done where it's more balanced. Again, I don't have a specific, but North Carolina is the only one that just puts growth at such a low value. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. And I support that idea. If you look at the states that originated these models for accountability, states like Texas and Florida, they use at least a 60-40 split and sometimes like a 45-55 or even more balanced approach. And also, thanks for lifting up the superintendent's proposal, which takes into account a lot more factors than simply the growth and proficiency, and then really help paint a more complete picture of the work we're doing in career and technical education, job preparedness, college and career ready work as well. So all of that is very important. And of course, it's important to remind people that both our legislative agenda and the North Carolina School Boards Association agenda, both of which are bipartisan bodies, have identified the problem with this grading system, and it remains a high priority of these organizations. So thank you. I will follow up just because I am curious. You know, it's great to hear that we are 7th in the state and 4th in the state in terms of proficiency and college and career readiness. But you know, we're going to ask who's better, who's doing a better job than us, and is there anything that we can learn from them and incorporate into our work as well?
Absolutely. We do have the list, and we can provide that information for you. And we will do it right now if you would like.
I do appreciate that, Dr. Robinson. Thank
But the
you.
thing that I will share with you, and Dr. Taylor may want to share this and speak on it, out of all the PSUs and the large districts, we are numero uno.
All right.
Not just in our hearts.
Yes.
The only thing I'll add is that when you are a large district, it is extremely difficult to be able to have numbers that are going to be reflected across the board at this level. So we are extremely proud that as a large district and the largest in the state, that we rank where we do. And when you begin to see those districts, they do have smaller numbers, and I know the numbers don't always matter, but it is much easier when you're a smaller district. You can really coordinate the efforts that take place within schools, within teachers, classrooms, and with principals, but it's much more difficult to manage when you have a district this size. And I can tell you that the work that we're doing as a district, what we're doing in the academics department, is going to make it even better. And so we're really excited, but we'll share that.
All right. I appreciate that. And I do know, Dr. Taylor, from just last week, this past week, you and I and Ms. Rice had attended the presentation about the HELPS program. And we could see in individual schools the real impact those direct interventions, the volunteer services, working on K-3 literacy were really having. And I hope as we look to the fall in October, maybe you can tell us some of your insights into some of the strategies that have helped produce some of this growth to get us to where we are exceeding pre-pandemic achievement levels.
Absolutely.
All right. Further questions? Anyone? And did you have one, Doc? Go ahead. Thanks.
Can you clarify again what factors into the college and career readiness, the percentage you got there on page?
Yeah,
8?
so are you referring to the difference between grade level proficiencies and college and career readiness and why the two are different and what it looks like? Yeah. Absolutely.
Sure. So when students take the assessments, there are 4 achievement levels: not proficient, level 3, level 4, level 5. Students who perform at a level 3, 4, and 5 are considered grade level proficient, whereas students who perform at a level 4 and 5 are considered college and career ready.
Thank you. Any follow-ups, any additional questions? Any questions for any of our members online? We'll go to Ms. Caulfield.
Hi, thank you for that information and for breaking that down. I do also look forward to learning more about this in October, because it is very hard to see when you have a 90% graduation rate, but your proficiency is only at 64%. It's kind of like the math doesn't add up. So hopefully, whatever we see in October, we'll be able to break it down a little bit better, as Ms. Edmonds has said, breaking down the growth, because it is an important factor to put that in there, that, you know, these kids are growing in the right direction, so that should help our proficiency going forward. The EVAS scores that, the testing that they do, is that comparing individual year to year or by the quarter?
It's a year to year.
Yeah, it's year to year.
It is a year to year. Okay. And when we say career, college and career ready, that's that they're exceeding, that they're getting to like a level 5?
A level 4 or 5.
Yeah, level
4 or 5? And you said that we're at 47.7%?
47.7%.
Okay. I think that's all I have for right now.
All right, thank you. All right, if there are no further questions, we will eagerly await additional presentation coming up later this fall. Thank
Board
you.
Chair, esteemed board members, on October the 1st, please bring your thinking caps and get ready, because we're going to have a lot of data for you to unpack. And we will hit it from every angle and answer all the questions you have.
All right, you're going to test our proficiency in college and career readiness. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, next on our agenda, we'll turn to our security updates. And again, this will be a two-part presentation. We will have our open session discussion for important issues that have been brought to us by members of the public. And then I know we have some very specific security-related data and information which would be appropriate only for closed session. So when we transition, we will transition our meeting over to the board conference room for the closed session portion. All right, so welcome back, Dr. Robinson. Long time no see, and welcome to you, Mr. Scott, as well.
Go ahead and get started. Okay. Good afternoon, Board Chair, Superintendent Taylor, and board members. As we had two items for you today, the first one is going to be our spectator event bag rules. We're going to just do a quick review of that. As you know, back in 2023, April of 2023, principals requested consistent guidance on the event bag rules if we were to bring those forward. Initial group was formed to develop those guidelines, and that group was some folks from communications as well as from, I think I'm up, but I'm not. Okay, sorry. Initial group was formed to develop those guidelines, and that were communications folks, some security officials, as well as some principals. We created a draft feedback form to get input from principals, area superintendents, chief officers, Tharrington Smith, law enforcement, as well as athletic directors and the Office of Security. Development of those rules brought forward, sorry, my clicker is acting up here today. So the rules will be applied to all high school spectator events. Those we brought forward was March 1. Back in the spring, we wanted to kind of do a soft opening, so that's why we brought them forward in the spring, and then we're looking to have that in place for a little while before we ran into our football season in the fall. It created a standard for all schools, and we wanted to do a full review of the semester break of the 24-25 school year, so that's coming up at the end of the football season, so we wanted to give it a complete run-through of all sports, and the biggest one being the football season, to do our break and review right around the winter break, and it will increase safety at all of our spectator events. And you can see here a picture kind of depicting what those bag guidelines were. Communications helped launch a large communications plan for informing of our stakeholders, which were principals, athletic directors, staff, students, and the community. We developed signs in English and Spanish. We also developed a Wake Connect site internally, as well as a public-facing website to bring forward all of our FAQs, all of our training videos, all of our information as to how this new set of rules are going to roll out. We did virtual office hours for internal stakeholders, and then we put together training videos for the public and training videos for our staff to go over to learn how to implement these rules. And they've been in place now since March 1. And that was just a quick overview, and I just wanted to take this time to get any questions if we had any.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scott. We'd had some board members ask us to bring us an update on the bag policy and its implementation through the district. So we appreciate you bringing us the update. First, we'll ask questions. I'll turn to Ms. Edmonds.
Thanks. Just a couple. I know you said you're waiting for the end of football season to collect your data, but are you hearing do you have any sense of how that's going in real time? Like, are people approaching to get into the game and they don't have the right bag? Like, is that happening a lot or average, I'm sure they have the opportunity to take their stuff to their car and come back or what have you. Are you getting some of that feedback?
So I can tell you a couple things we did to get information. I myself have been to several games and have just watched how they go. Haven't had anyone come up to me when I've gone to games and given me any of that type of feedback. We really wanted to wait until that fall break because football is really where we're going to gather that information. We're only 3-4 games into the season so far. I did speak with Mr. Hershey earlier today, and he had indicated that he has not had any type of feedback, or positive or negative, really, from any of his constituents. So I think we're going to get most of that come football time. We do have in the public facing as well as our internal page a place where people can go and send that, and we just haven't received a lot yet. But I think the majority of that's going to come around once football season is over with.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Evans. Dr. Ng.
What is the, for those who are visiting our grounds, our campuses, as an away team, families coming over to us, how are we disseminating that information to them about our rules?
So I was talking with the athletic directors early on in the process. They were encouraged to contact, so for example, if Dr. Robinson is a coach of a team coming to my school, that I would, as the AD, reach out to him, let him know, hey, Wake County Schools has these rules in place. You can go to our public-facing website to see those, and that way he can inform his constituents in his school before they even come to us that they'll know this is what the expectation is when they come to us.
I just wonder, I'm hoping that we'll get some information later, but, in terms of the differential between, the compliance rate for people who are within our system versus those who are outside of our system. Thanks.
And just a quick follow-up on that. I know that for many years, Cardinal Gibbons has had a clear bag policy, and we'll play them in several different athletics. I'm more familiar with football. Have we seen, I guess, any issues of people coming in with different expectations, or has there been confusion from people coming from inside the system or outside the system?
I have not been brought to light any concerns of that nature.
And I will share, none of that information has been brought to light or shared with any of us. Typically, there's a lot of compliance with regards to the expectations when you go to visiting sites. Athletic directors, principals, they always communicate with the visiting schools. They always iron out those specifics and make sure that everybody understands the guidelines, the policies, and procedures. And typically, even from my own experience, I've never seen it where there was a situation where anyone was just defiant and didn't want to adhere to those expectations.
Great. Thank you. Any further questions? Ms. Caulfield?
Thank you. In regards to the clear bags, I know we have the policy, and I know that we do see this in a lot of other organizations, big, PNC arena concerts and stuff like that. At these events, the clear bags are mostly for after-school events and mostly for football, correct?
Any large spectator event.
Okay, so if they come into this school and we do, say, basketball, do they have the clear bags there as well?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is really more along the lines of checking the bags. And I'm not sure if this is meant for this conversation or a closed session that's coming up next. Do we have any training or who would be checking the bags, and will we be putting that into a process?
Can I ask a clarifying question? When you say checking the bags, what are you referring to exactly?
So like when you go to PNC Arena, for example, or you go to see a concert at Coastal Credit Union, when you walk in, there's one entrance in, and that's kind of how we do it with our football games and our basketball games, is one entrance to go in. But you do also have to open up your bag, which is an extra layer of security.
So in the training video that you see, the bag is presented to the person at the entrance. They are to look into it. The directions are clear that if someone, for example, took a large non-clear bag, put it into a clear bag that you can't see into, they're asked to open it so we can see what's inside of it. But the purpose of that clear bag is so that you can really see the contents in it when they come up to the entrance. So the video clearly shows, the training videos clearly show that procedure happening.
So we are training our staff that they're supposed to be checking bags at the gates.
So when they come up with the bag, if they can't see into it, the FAQs clearly state on there. If you can't see into the bag, ask the person to open it so you can see into it. They're not doing an invasive deep dive search of moving your items and putting their hands inside the bags. No, they can't do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional questions, any follow-up?
Chair Haggerty.
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Just in response to kind of the point that Dr. Ng raised and the question about other schools coming to our district. I know Durham County Public Schools has clear bag. I think Orange County has instituted it. I think Guilford schools have a clear bag policy. So there's not, in my experience in going to games, a lot of counties around us are adopting clear bag policies if they don't already have one. And certainly, as Chair Haggerty mentioned, Cardinal Gibbons has had one for a number of years, and so they play, a number of our schools on a regular basis, including being in one of our conferences that has six or seven teams or so. So it's pretty common practice at games. I've never seen any incidents at games. Not that I always would, but I am at other county football stadiums often on Thursdays and Fridays, and it's pretty seamless and easy there. So I haven't heard of or experienced any issues with that from people coming to our Wake County Public Schools.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hershey. So I know that we have several other items in the update as well, so I'll turn it back over to Dr. Robinson and Mr. Scott.
Okay, we're ready to transition to our second topic. And that is just a very high-level incident review of an incident that happened at Heritage High School. So today, what I'm just going to cover in the open session here, just a very few high-level things. We'll do an incident overview of what the incident was, high-level overview of the timeline itself. We'll look a little bit of the core capability responsibilities that we took a look at in our after-action review. We'll take a look at the after-action review process itself and then allow for any questions. And from there. So the incident itself was August 29th. There was a bomb threat called in to Heritage High School. There was an additional threat that happened shortly after that threat was called in. The action taken of the initial bomb threat was to evacuate the school into the football stadium. So in an incident review timeline, these are just, I wanted to take some big high-level chunks of what happened that day. So the bomb threat was called in first. That was our first step, which was 10:17. We'd started an evacuation shortly thereafter. It was completed at 10:31. We had another threat that happened at 10:41. Communication was sent out to parents. That actually, if we back that up, happened as we did our initial bomb threat process, but that second threat changed all of that process. We had additional resources that were requested at 11:11. Transportation buses started arriving and dismissal started around 12:13. And then the event it concluded at 1:47. Some of the core capabilities that we, in any of these AAR situations or large events that we want to take a look at are our district command center that operates here out of Crossroads 1. We have the incident command, not to be confused with our district command. The incident command happens at the site of the emergency, or the incident. In this case, we had a student dismissal process that we wanted to evaluate. We had transportation component, and then our staff response to the incident. So in the AAR, we had several departments that participated during the response and recovery phases of the event. We did a large-scale after-action review that was conducted after the event of all stakeholders that are relevant to the incident, and we collected feedback from emergency response agencies as well as school-based employees and central services departments that responded to the incident. So again, this is just a high-level look at what happened that day. I'll be happy to take some questions now if we want to do that, and then I think we're also going to do some in the closed session piece, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Anything that's specifically related
To that.
to
yeah.
the incident in terms of something that could be a risk to students,
Right.
we'll address in closed session, as well as some specifics I know you wanted to share. But just in general, and I'd categorize that as questions about process, feedback from parents, questions about policy that you might have. We've had a number of parents that have raised this issue with us, either passing questions on to us or just wanting to hear more about the situation in general, specifically about after students were evacuated from the building, what processes were in place to ensure their safety and well-being, either, in this case, in extreme heat. Other board members have raised questions about other extreme weather situations where we might have a situation where a school needed to be evacuated. So I'll open it up to board members for any specific questions.
Covering for just one point of clarity also.
Yes,
while we're
please.
at that. So what I think is appropriate to hear now is that there was a second incident or a second threat that did change the dynamic of what the initial thing was. There was also some communication question about how fast things went. I want you to know that the communications department works very close with us. They were in the command center within minutes of this happening. The change of that, I think some of that detail you're going to get in the closed session will be more clarifying to you when you hear that and see that.
All right, great, thank you. So you've heard Dr. Scott's, sorry, Mr. Scott's giving you a
I like to be a
promotion.
doctor, but I didn't make it there.
You heard Mr. Scott's, division of some of the issues related to this, and knowing that you will hear more specifics in closed session, are there questions right now related to this event or just to our process for how we approach these events? Dr. Eng?
Just to clarify, in your district command center, who's the go-to person, the person in kind of leading everything in an incident like this?
So the command center is actually in my office, and myself, and I have behind you our Director of Special Operations, Mr. Cortez, and Mr. Canterbury, who's our Director of Operations, are there. The three of us are the initial people that will start. Communications is typically there very shortly after, and then we analyze the incident, pull in those resources that are needed. It could be district leadership, as Dr. Robinson may end up coming down, Dr. Taylor may be coming down, if there's transportation need. So it just depends, incident depending on who we need to call in once we kind of get that initial assessment of what's happening.
Follow-up?
Yes, follow-up. Maybe that's later on a question, or maybe you can answer it now, but in terms of like when do you decide that EMS or other ancillary, people or services will be involved in that, in the response?
So, Mr. Malone, due to the nature of the incident and what the question was being asked, is that something that we can answer in open, or can we respond to that in closed?
I think it'd be better in closed.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Dr. Eng, any further questions for the open session? All right. Ms. Mahaffey?
No, I'm just curious what the motion is to go into closed session, because I worry about crossing that line. But I see
Sure.
Ms. Caulfield has her hand up.
Thank you. And we do have some more general questions as well. Ms. Caulfield?
Thank you. I first wanted to give kudos to the school security and the Wake Forest Police Department and staff, because I do feel that the evacuation went very well and very quick as far as getting it out. I do know, and I did receive a lot of feedback in regards to what happened afterwards. So I know that we're going to discuss that. By all means, anything I say, if it needs to go into closed session, I will hold off. But I'm just trying to understand as far as the weather protocol, whether it be heat or rain or cold or whatever it is, do we have a certain process in place?
I will answer your question this way. The structures and protocols and the procedures that you're referring to have been mandated by the superintendent that we will have something in place for inclement weather and things of that nature, where it be, we can't say exactly what it is, but when we go in closed session, we can explain it to you what that protocol is going to look like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And do we also have a protocol with the time or length because of communication that we reach out? Not necessarily that we will have details for the parents or families, but how quickly we want to respond to them. Obviously, all teams that need to be on deck and are handling that immediately is the most important. But I think that was one of the biggest concerns I had from parents and being a parent of that school, also receiving communication. I didn't receive the communication until just minutes before the dismissal was scheduled. So I'm just trying to let the public know what we're working on and how we go about doing that so they know what to expect.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. We made a change about a year ago to upgrade our processes so that at the first notification of a code yellow or code red or an evacuation, we set a timer. It's within 5 minutes. We send out the first communication. That first communication that parents get is very brief. There's not enough time in there to explain why or what. It's just that this has happened. We try to strive for those 5 minutes or less in all cases. In this case, there was a technical issue that impacted some parents, and so we're looking into what happened in this case.
Okay, so you're saying that there was communication that was sent out?
Yeah, and so I was just checking on our website a second ago. When the incident happened, 24,000 people visited our website or 24,000 times people visited our website that day. One of the things that we try to communicate out to the public, because there's lots of things that can happen while we communicate. Is that the website is the best place to get the updated information. We'll always update the website. So I was checking a second ago to see when the website was updated and how many people visited it. So 24,000 people visited the website. What happens after the website is a text message gets sent in English, a text message gets sent in Spanish, an email gets sent in English, an email gets sent in Spanish, and then depending on the nature of the emergency, a voice call goes out, especially if there's urgent action that we need to take. So within that piece, we do understand that there was an error that occurred and that not everybody received all pieces of those communications, and so that is what we're looking into.
Okay. And then what would be our protocol? And this might be a two-part question, and it might be something that we discuss in closed session. But on this particular day, it was like 97 degrees in a field of over 100, and they're sitting up in a big, huge field on the bleachers, and it's quite hot. So at what point do we get evacuated that we then have either a separate team or whoever needs to be involved that is tending to the students' needs? Because I know obviously our first and foremost is the security and getting the children away from the building, but how are we going to move going forward?
I think that's more of a closed session question.
Okay, that's fine. I'll hold off on that. I think a lot of the other questions I have are closed session, so that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Caulfield. I do want to be respectful of time. I know there's some other kind of general questions that had come in, and so I wanted to sort of bring those up to you right now, and anything that needs to be deferred to closed session can be deferred. Specific to communications, we heard that the website is the best place, and Chief Luton, I don't know, I might need you back up here for this one. The website is the best place for families to receive updates. When an email or a text goes out about a situation, does it refer families to the website and tell them that that's the place to go for updates?
No. So the first message that goes out, and this is one of the changes that we've made in the past year, the first message that goes out, and I'm looking at Sarah to confirm, the first message that goes out, we've pre-translated them, the code red, the code yellow. That is simply a 2-sentence alert that says, we want to notify you that your child's school is in this situation. That one is pretty brief. It goes, it does not get linked to the website, correct, Sarah? Right. Sarah's saying it doesn't link to the website, but it does say check the website for the most recent updates. Yep.
Okay, thank you. One thing to perhaps talk about for some discussion is when parents get those notices, obviously it creates a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety. It brings every nightmare scenario immediately to mind. You know, we have these codes, code yellow, code green, code red, and when you hear code red, you know, you assume the worst. But I know out of precautions, we'll put a lot of situations into a code red where there's been a report or a threat, but nothing has been verified, nothing has been confirmed. And I'm wondering if we've looked at the language we use around those notifications, if there's a way, you know, we could perhaps be a little more descriptive or do something maybe to address expectations around, you know, as a parent, what news I might get or what I might see next.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this briefly, but y'all are going to have some patience with me. So last night, I was doing a little historical dive into our crisis communications. As reference, we've been doing it formally for about a decade now. And I was looking back at those early years, and you think about what the world was like 10 years ago, right? You know, the social media it wasn't new, but it was, you know, starting to become really prevalent in our lives. And the conversations that we had 10 years ago that I had with our area superintendents was, let's figure out how to make sure that we maintain order in the building, right? Because at that time, you know, it took a while for the information to flow. This past 2 years, the number of crises that we're responding to have over doubled. Over 66% increase before pre-pandemic years. And the expectation of the community every day, every month, for good reason. You all know now I'm a parent of a kindergarten student, so I get these letters. You know, the urgency to get them out, the necessity to have them quickly, you know, has increased, and for all good reason. And so what you're asking, Chair Haggerty, is something that we look at every single incident. How can we improve? How can we get faster? How can we provide the appropriate amount of information with the knowledge that what we're seeing, and this is kind of outside of heritage, but what we're seeing recently has to do with copycat effects and has to do with the amount of publicity that these events get. You know, one of the things that Kendrick and I talk about often is we pray for 3-day weekends, right? Because 3-day weekends gives us that extra day and that extra break to allow kids to move on to something else. So that's a long answer to say, Chair Haggerty, that every incident, we look at how we said it, we look at what we're sharing, we're evaluating the communications really closely. We look at how we can share more information more quickly, while maintaining the expectation that we send it out quickly in multiple languages, which means parts and pieces of it, at least in this time, have to be pre-created, pre-translated, pre-loaded into our systems. When we make edits and provide more information early on, it requires that we go through the translation process. You can think about 5 minutes, right? I mean, how long does it take you to write just a regular email to your husband or wife or spouse, right? It takes about 5 minutes. Imagine doing that 4 different times in 2 different languages. So that's kind of the push and pull. The other thing I will say is we're also looking at new technology. We're looking at ways in which technology can help us in that area. I think Kendrick has talked a lot about the rave, the panic button, things like that. So technology is also keeping pace, and we're looking at our current systems and how we can upgrade those current systems to keep up with the expectation of families. Long answer for a short question.
No, I appreciate that, Chief Luton, I do. To follow up on just a couple of other things, you talked about social media, And social media, we've seen, particularly following the Georgia incident, has produced a number of copycat threats at high schools, middle schools, and I think maybe even in elementary school. As a district, we have to take every threat seriously, but in terms of what we can do to help combat that, have we put out any communications, or do we have a strategy for sharing? And I think I've seen this, but I just want to ask for the public's benefit, sharing with families what the penalties are for making these threats, even if it's done as a joke, even if it's done to get out of school. What are the consequences? What are we doing to communicate that to parents? And are we doing anything to encourage parents to monitor social media activity to make sure their children really understand the consequences of their actions?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll answer that we want every student, every parent to know that when we get information to identify that it is them, then we take that very seriously, and the discipline consequences will be the maximum of what we can do, because we know that the impact that it has. In addition to that, we also will continue to work with law enforcement, because certain kinds of actions, such as calling in bomb threats, that is something that law enforcement will also be involved in. And so I appreciate you asking that question, so that we can reaffirm to our parents and our students how serious we take it. We also want to say that we recognize that a lot of these incidents, it is very difficult for law enforcement to identify who they are, because people now have the capability to mask or VPN, where before they could know that it was my computer sitting at this location, but now I could say I'm in Argentina. But we want to reaffirm that when these kinds of incidents happen, and we know who the students are, if we know who the individual is, even if they're outside of our school system, we will do the fullest that we are legally able to do, and we know that law enforcement does the same thing.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And then the final question that I'd received were questions about, in a situation where we have a security incident in general, is there any advice, or do you have any general observations about the use of mobile phones, technology, and like best practices? We've seen where cell phone towers have been overloaded. We've seen where inaccurate information has come out of situations. We've seen where information from inside a school has been broadcast that could lead to additional security threats. And I don't know if you have any advice or guidance to provide at this time.
Probably the number one thing I would want the public to hear is, if you're a student and you get one of these threats, inform an adult. Spreading it and moving it through your own social media platform oftentimes makes that problem worse. If a kid gets something through a text message or social media post or any type of threat that comes through their electronic device, the number one thing they should do is let an adult in that building know, whether it's their teacher, an administrator, the SRO, whoever it is. That would be the number one thing and just not sharing it and blasting it and making it worse than what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. All right, at this time, Ms. Evans, did you have a final question?
Just very quickly, I wanted to comment to Ms. Luton and your team. You didn't mention this here, but I think it's important to say in open session that you've told us that there's a very, very delicate, challenging balance between fast and accurate. And I just want to acknowledge that delicate, just very fragile and challenging dilemma that you face when these things happen, and that I think that is the right approach. So I just want to acknowledge that and let the public know that you're very attuned, that the information needs to be quick, but it also needs to be accurate.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. All right, at this time, I'd entertain a motion for us to go into closed session to receive.
Before you go into close, Chair Haggerty?
Yes, Mr. Hershey.
One comment real quick, just because I just want to give voice to it. I know I sent you an email and staff and the policy chair and vice chair. It was a tough, and this is security related, so it was a tough week, 8-9 days at Sanderson High School. We had an incident on Sunday night leading into Monday, or online threat. And parents kept their kids, some parents kept their kids home. And so to bring to the attention of the board as it relates to this, it could be board policy that is preventing the principal from making those excused absences, which, we don't want to add to the anxiety that kids and families are already feeling when we have these online threats. So I wanted to just give voice to it now and allow staff and our policy chair and vice chair to take that into consideration, and I appreciate it.
All right. Any response to that, or no?
No, I really don't have a response, but if you allow us a couple of days to gather all the information and bring it back, I will definitely touch base with Committee Chair Mahaffey and share that information.
I appreciate that, and I make a motion to go into close before Ms. Mahaffey does.
Second.
All right, Mr. Malone, is that sufficient?
For all the reasons that Chair Haggerty will be saying.
For all the reasons listed on the regular board meeting agenda under closed session.
All right, we
I
have
accept that.
we have Mr. Hershey's assent to Ms. Mahaffey's friendly amendment. So I heard the amendment from Mr. Hershey. I heard a second from Mr. Swanson. All in favor? Amendment. And, as Mr. Swanson reminds us, because we have members remotely, we will have to do the vote by roll call. So we'll begin with Mr. Hershey.
Aye.
Dr. Ng.
Aye.
Ms. Edmonds. Aye. Ms. Mahaffey.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler. All right, Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Caulfield. All right, so by unanimous vote of the members present voting, we will now move into closed session for the reasons cited. We will, from closed session, we'll move directly into our open meeting for the regular board meeting back here at 5:30. Thank you.